I'm going to attempt to read, squirrels. I have a butterscotch in my mouth for my... Okay, we are still on chapter 2. Presently, Mr. Symington began to speak. He spoke clearly and slowly, delivering himself of much good sense and shrewd acumen. He settled the matter in hand, and I rose to go, remarking as I did so, "I walked down the hill with your stepdaughter." For a moment, Mr. Symington looked as though he did not know who his stepdaughter was, and then he smiled. "Oh, yes, of course, Megan. She has been back from school some time. We're thinking about finding her something to do, but of course she's very young still, and backward for her age, so they say. Yes, so they tell me." I went out. In the outer office was a very old man on a stool, writing slowly and laboriously. A small, cheeky-looking boy and a middle-aged woman with frizzy hair and pince-nez. I looked up how to say that word, but I don't think I looked up. I didn't pay attention to what it meant. I don't think. If I did, it's gone. Pince-nez. Now it's saying no definition found. Well, I guess that's why I didn't say. Weird. Who was typing with some speed and dash. If this was Miss Gench, I agreed with Owen Griffith that tender passages between her and her employer were exceedingly unlikely. I went into the baker's and said my piece about the currant loaf. He was received with the exclamation and incredulity proper to the occasion, and a new currant loaf was thrust upon me in replacement. Fresh from the oven this minute, as its indecent heat pressed against my chest proclaimed to be no less than truth. I came out of the shop and looked up and down the street, hoping to see Joanna with the car. The walk had tired me a good deal, and it was awkward getting along with my sticks and the currant loaf. But there was no sign of Joanna as yet. Suddenly my eyes were held in glad and incredulous surprise. Along the pavement towards me there came floating a goddess. There's really no other word for it. The perfect features, the crisply curling golden hair, the tall, exquisitely shaped body, and she walked like a goddess without effort, seeming to swim nearer and nearer, a glorious and incredible, a breathtaking girl. In my intense excitement, something had to go. What went was the currant loaf. It slipped from my clutches. I made a dive after it and lost my stick, which clattered to the pavement, and I slipped and nearly fell myself. It was the strong arm of the goddess that caught and held me. I began to stammer, "Thanks, softly. I'm frightfully sorry." She had retrieved the currant loaf and handed it to me together with the stick, and then she smiled kindly and said cheerfully, "Don't mention it. No trouble, I assure you." And the magic died completely before the flat, competent voice. A nice, healthy-looking, well-set-up girl. No more. I fell to reflecting what would have happened if the gods had given Helen of Troy exactly those flat accents. How strange that a girl could trouble your inmost soul so long as she kept her mouth shut, and that the moment she spoke the glamour could vanish as though it had never been. I had known the reverse happened, though. I had seen a little sad, monkey-faced woman whom no one would turn to look at twice. Then she opened her mouth, and suddenly enchantment had lived and bloomed, and Cleopatra had cast her spell anew. Joanna had drawn up at the curb beside me without my noticing her arrival. She asked if there was anything the matter. "Nothing," I said, pulling myself together. "I was reflecting on Helen of Troy and others." "What a funny place to do it," said Joanna. "You look most odd, standing there clasping currant bread to your breast with your mouth wide open." "I've had a shock," I said. "I've been transplanted to Ilium and back again." "Do you know who that is?" I added, indicating a retreating back that was swimming gracefully away. Peering after the girl, Joanna said it was the Symington's nursery governess. Sorry, every once in a while I have to swallow and it don't half hurt. She goddess. "Is that what struck you all of a heap?" she asked. "She's good looking, but a bit of a wet fish." "I know," I said, "just a nice, kind girl, and I'd been thinking her Aphrodite." Joanna opened the door of the car, and I got in. "It's funny, isn't it?" she said. "Some people have lots of looks and absolutely no S.A. That girl has. It seems such a pity." I said that if she was a nursery governess, it was probably just as well. And that's all of chapter 2. I'll go ahead with 3. That afternoon we went to tea with Mr. Pye, P-Y-E. Mr. Pye was an extremely ladylike, plump little man, devoted to his petite point chairs, his Dresden shepherdesses, and his collection of bric-a-brac. He lived at Prior's Lodge, in the grounds of which were the ruins of the old priory. Priory's Lodge was certainly a very exquisite house, and under Mr. Pye's loving care it showed to its best advantage. Every piece of furniture was polished and set in the exact place most suited to it. The curtains and cushions were of exquisite tone and color, and of the most expensive silks. It was hardly a man's house, and it did strike me that to live there would be rather like taking up one's abode in a period room at a museum. Mr. Pye's principal enjoyment in life was taking people around his house. Even those completely insensitive to their surroundings could not escape. Even if you were so hardened as to consider the essentials of living a radio, a cocktail bar, a bath, and a bed surrounded by the necessary walls, Mr. Pye did not despair of leading you to better things. His small, plump hands quivered with with sensibility as he described his treasures, and his voice rose to a falsetto squeak as he narrated the exciting circumstances under which he had brought his Italian bedstead home from Verona. Joanna and I, both being fond of antiquities and of period furniture, met with approval. Yeah. I lost my place again. Met with approval. It really is a pleasure, a great pleasure, to have such an acquisition to our little community. The dear good people down here, you know, so painfully bucolic, not to say provincial. They don't know anything. Vandals, absolute vandals, and the inside of their houses, it would make you weep, dear lady. I assure you, it would take nothing but you weep. Wait a minute. Dear lady, I assure you it would make you weep. It would make you weep, dear lady. I assure you it would make you weep. Perhaps it has done so. Joanna said she hadn't quite gone as far as that. But you see what I mean. They mix things so terribly. I've seen with my own eyes a most delightful little Sheridan piece, a delicate, perfect. A collector's piece, absolutely, and next to it a Victorian occasional table, or quite possibly a funnel oak revolving bookcase. Yes, even that. Fumed oak. He shuddered and murmured plaintively, "Why are people so blind? You agree, I'm sure you agree, that beauty is the only thing worth living for." Hypnotized by his earnestness, Joanna said, yes, that was so. "Then why," demanded Mr. Pye, "do people surround themselves with ugliness?" Joanna said it was very odd. Odd? It's criminal. That's what I call it. Criminal. And the excuses they give. They say something is uncomfortable or that it is quaint. Quaint. Such a horrible word. "The house you've taken," went on Mr. Pye, "Miss Emily Barton's house. Now that is charming, and she has some quite nice pieces. Quite nice. One or two of them are really first class, and she has taste too, although I'm not quite so sure as to what she does. No. She has taste too, although I'm not quite so sure of that as I was. Sometimes I'm afraid I think it's really sentimental. She likes to keep things as they were, but not for le bon motif, not because of the resultant harmony, but because it is the way her mother had them. He transferred his attention to me, and his voice changed. It altered from that of the rapt artist to that of the born gossip. "You didn't know the family at all?" "No, quite so, yes, through house agents. But, my dears, you ought to have known that family. When I came here, the old woman was still alive. An incredible person. Quite incredible. A monster, if you know what I mean. Positively a monster. The old-fashioned Victorian monster devouring her young. Yes, that's what it amounted to. She was monumental, you know. Must have weighed 17 stone. And all the 5 daughters revolved around her. Girls? Oh, that's... I'm sorry, this is terrible. Five daughters revolved around her. The girls, that's how she always spoke of them, the girls. And the eldest was well over 60 then. Those stupid girls, she used to call them sometimes. Black slaves, that's all they were, fetching and carrying and agreeing with her. 10 o'clock, they had to go to bed, and they weren't allowed a fire in their bedroom. And as for asking their own friends to the house, that would have been unheard of. She despised them, for for not getting married, and yet so arranged their lives that it was practically impossible for them to meet anybody. I believe Emily, or perhaps it was Agnes, did some kind of affair with the curate, but his family wasn't good enough. And Mama soon put a stop to that. It sounds like a novel, said Joanna. Oh, my dear, it was. And then the dreadful old woman died, but of course it was far too late then. They just went on living there and talking in hushed voices about what poor Mama would have wished. Even repapering her bedroom they felt to be quite sacrilegious. Still, they did enjoy themselves in the parish in the right way. No, in a quiet way. But none of them had much stamina, and they just died off one by one. Influenza took Miss to sleep. Let me finish this page if I can. I'm so sorry, y'all. Still, they did enjoy themselves in the quiet way, but none of them had much stamina, and they just died off one by one. Influenza took off Edith, and Minnie had an operation and didn't recover, and poor Mabel had a stroke. Emily looked after her in the most devoted manner. Really, that poor woman has done nothing but nursing for the last 10 years. A charming creature, don't you think? Like a piece of Dresden. So sad for her having financial anxieties, but of course, all investments have depreciated. And I'm going to stop right there. I'm sorry, y'all. I keep waiting till too late in the day. It takes me a good while during the morning to wake up. But I go to bed late, get up so doggone early. I don't know why I just don't roll over and go back to sleep. I love y'all. Thanks for the prayers for my whole throat and ears and glands. Thank goodness the headache's gone and the eyeball pressure. Yay! That's something. Have an appointment tomorrow at 1:30. They give me something good to knock. I wish they'd give shots. They used to give shots and it would knock it out right quick. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Mwah. Bye-bye.